Wow, that's what I have to say about being here in this incredible community. I'm always deeply moved. Amy and I were talking before the service. I feel like I've been here so many times, and this is actually only my third, and I say only third. It feels like I've been with you for an eternity. And really, that is because we have. In the realm of spirit, we know there's no time. We know there's no separation. And we know that love is actually the truth of who and what we are. Now, I want to be careful the way I say this in the beginning, because I was struck by the quote from Jesus, and I want to modify it. Now, it's very sacrilegious in some circles to say I'm going to modify a quote from Jesus, and I don't mean that there's anything inherently wrong with the quote. I want to offer that evolution and consciousness is expanding at all times, including the consciousness that is Jesus, the consciousness that is Buddha, the consciousness that is Joan of Arc, and all the other incredible enlightened beings that have been here. When I heard the quote this morning, "Forgive them, for they know not what they do," it struck me, forgive them, for they know not who they are. And what we're talking about today is levels of spiritual understanding. And of course, as things happen, of course what Amy shared and the Daily Word were perfectly in alignment with what is emerging as the conversation about levels of spiritual understanding. There's a lot happening in our world right now, as there always is. I read something recently that said, this has always been happening. The difference now is we all have cameras. And I think that's really true. Because what's happening is as we evolve and as we wake up, technology is allowing us to take a look. To take a look at what's going on. And what I'm really here today to be with is this idea and this knowing that there is the invisible realm of existence and the visible realm of existence. And that in the visible realm of existence, there's a whole lot of things happening that we might call horrific. And in the invisible realm, we recognize that there is wholeness and perfection and oneness. See, even words are limited. In the invisible realm, there is that place within each of us that is unharmable and unharmed. What happens is when we make a shift from living in the visible realm to living from the invisible realm, everything changes. And I'm going to say it again because I was careful the way I said that. When we shift from living in the visible realm to living as the invisible realm. And that's different than living in the invisible. And so there's a whole lot of talk right now about transformation and about awakening, and that it's an incredible time to live on this planet in terms of the awakening of human consciousness. And then there's all this other stuff happening. It boggles the mind. It boggles my mind. And what I recognize is that this is not about figuring this out in our minds. That when we tap into the invisible realm, that knowing of the truth of who and what we are, we can actually move into a place of forgive me for I know not who I am. Because absolutely everything that has happened in my life has been either me knowing the truth of who and what I am and living as that, or having, as we say in unity teachings, error thinking. I could maybe modify that language. But it's the idea, not that there's something wrong here, but that I have forgotten the truth. And can it be that simple? I actually say yes. And it can't be that easy. I say yes as well. Now, a lot of us are carrying around a story that it's simple but not easy. And as long as I believe that story, it's simple and not easy. See, that's what happens here. That's what happens when we come into a community like this one, that you can feel, I can feel this dedication and this intentionality around knowing who and what we are. And then we walk around also with this human body, this ego suit, if you will, that's filled with thinking and physicality and ideas of rightness and wrongness. And so what I want to focus on today is the conversation of spiritual understanding. And what I was sitting with before getting up here is, what's this understanding anyway? You know, because I actually thought understanding was here. I need to figure it out. Boy, that's an interesting process, right? Let me figure this out. I spent years, actually decades, trying to figure it out. And then life blessed me with events that allowed the outer world to collapse. And I stood in this place where I had the opportunity to surrender. A lot of times we hear that difficulty provides a spiritual awakening. And I've come to understand, which is different than figuring it out, because it's experience. My experience showed me. Because people were asking me recently, like, what do you think? We've all had these peak experiences where for some reason we move into the realm of oneness, absolute knowing this truth without a doubt. Most of us have had that experience, if it's for 1 second, 1 hour, 1 day. Someone asked me, what helps us to have that experience? And what came to me is surrender. And see, life, the world, this visible realm offers us all kinds of opportunities. But it doesn't mean we're going to surrender. I've had all kinds of opportunities to surrender and still chosen not to. There's that little piece of me that thinks, no, I know how to do this, or I've got this. No, thank you, Spirit. I've got this one. And at one realm of spiritual understanding, that is the truth. We've got this, because we are this. But then in this other realm of understanding, it seems that we must surrender that in order to experience this deeper understanding of truth. And when the invisible realm, as I said, becomes the ultimate truth and we know it, I think last time I was here we were on the same principle, which means I guess I was here 5 weeks ago. This principle of living it. Right? Because it is one thing to have the bumper sticker, and those of us who have been around Unity and New Thought for some time, we know peace begins with me. But here's the thing. If I have even one judgment, within that judgment holds the seed of revenge. That is, or seems to be, the human condition. The spiritual condition knows no judgment. So once I have decided that there's something wrong here, there's an idea of revenge planted within that. And once I've done that, consciously or unconsciously, that sets that in motion. So I want to bring it into the room and bring it into real life experiences. We have an epidemic in our country right now around race and race relations. In the visible realm, this continues to be something that shows up. I promise what I'm about to say is going to tie back to that. I was recently interviewed on a podcast talking about LGBT addiction and recovery. And the two women that were interviewing me were both younger, straight, white women. And we went about a half an hour into the podcast, and I finally said, can we please talk about Orlando? And both of them, there was this big sigh of relief, and both of them said, oh, thank you. We wanted to bring that up, but we were afraid we might offend you by saying something. We didn't know how to talk about it. We didn't know what questions to ask. We were afraid. And so that allowed me to see that that very same dynamic is happening when we talk about race. Because here is, I was going to say here's my perspective, but we know that perspective actually comes from ego, and that's okay, because we're living in this world. But my perspective or my experience is that I absolutely know that I do not have the same experience of anyone else in this room. And that in that realm, it doesn't serve me to say I understand what you've been through, right? Because I don't. And so when we talk about any issue in the world, we recognize, or I recognize, there's always these different levels of understanding. What I'm really saying here is we honor our seeming differences, and yet we celebrate our oneness. And so in my journey, I've come to understand and recognize that there's nothing to learn. There's just a lot to unlearn. We were having a conversation earlier about what would it be like. We have these beautiful children up here. What would it have been like? Did anyone in here grow up in unity or in a New Thought movement? We have one person that probably heard from a very early age, you are whole and perfect, you are light, you are love. Most of us didn't get that one. Right? We got all kinds of other things. You need to achieve, you need to strive, you need to compete, you need to be better, you need to have good grades. Hard work. Life is hard work. I mean, right now, see, it comes easy to us when we start thinking about all those things that we were taught. So my experience was I came into this world absolutely present. Absolutely knowing the truth of who and what I am. And seeing that in every eye that I looked into. And then I got taught all this stuff that at some point caused me, and I don't know if it caused me, my decision was to close down. And I know I talked about that at least the first time I came here. But we all have different variations of that same story. And so the spiritual journey is about understanding this invisible realm fully and also honoring what's happened in the visible. And as we honor what's happened in the visible, we have the courage to have these conversations about race, about gender, about sexual orientation, those things about ourselves, about each other that seem to be separate. And so as we talk about and we're in conversation about what the world needs right now, it needs each of us to wake up to the truth of who and what we are. Because as each of us do that, the world shifts. At Awakened Living, which is our spiritual community in San Francisco, our topic this month is what if? And then each week we're exploring a different question. And today, Reverend Joan, who many of you know, is speaking there today. And her question is, what if we could change the world? Reverend Michael Beckwith says, we're not here to change the world, we're here to serve the new paradigm. And I'm like, that sounds good, but what the heck does that mean? What does that mean? Well, for me, what it means is, I thought I needed to change myself and change the world and get out there and make a difference. And as soon as I thought that, see what happened is then I planted the seed of something's wrong here. And what happens when we have these acts of violence is, when we come from a place, the mystical realm of recognizing that even in the midst of all of that, there is love. And even in the midst of all of that, that is who and what we are. And I'm even going to take that a step further and saying everything is either love or a request for love. Because the Course in Miracles says everything is love or fear. And I think that is true. And what if everything was love or a request for love? What if everything that was happening in the visible realm was an opportunity for each of us to unlearn the ideas we've been taught about separation, about fear, about competition, so that we could rest in this deeper truth, this deeper knowing. And from that place, see, it's not even about perspective, it's simply about being. And then the great paradox is that's what changes the world. So do you hear that? When I decide that I don't need to change anything, but the way I'm seeing myself, the way I'm being with myself, the greatest paradox is that's what is the ripple effect that creates change in the world. So my invitation for each of us today in this moment is to ask, what is one belief or one idea, because we can start very simple and right in this moment. What's one belief I've been carrying around about myself and the world that I'm willing to unlearn and live beyond? What if it was as simple as recognizing that that may seem true in the visible realm and I can tap into something deeper and truer? And what if community was simply about reflecting that back and providing a space with compassion and understanding for each of us to have the courage to talk about those parts of ourselves, those ideas we have that keep us separate, so that we can let go of those and rest in this deeper truth. So in closing, what I want to offer is an invitation to witness what happens in our perspective. Because see, what I know is that there is this great reality that we are, that doesn't need anything, doesn't need to go anywhere or do anything, but simply be right here. So my invitation for each of us is to go out into the world and be that, and see what happens. Because life is a great experiment. And we are playing in this field of consciousness that we are. And then we have this thing called reality that happens. And so every news story, see, I got a little bit, I'm gonna confess something. I got a little sucked into the political thing recently. Because it's so seductive, right? It's so seductive. I can't believe he said that. What's she going to say next? What are they going to say about that? What is it about that that's so appealing to us? What's that? Human. Yeah, we have this human side that has been taught all these ideas about competition and fear and separation. And so there's something about us that's maybe always going to be pulled that direction. And we have an opportunity in the midst of that to be love. So my invitation is we have the courage to have these conversations about our seeming differences, and we also recognize our oneness. What a blessing to be here in this moment. I want to say thank you to each of you for creating this community. Whether you're here for the first time or you've been here for decades, you created this community in this moment. It's absolutely dedicated to knowing this deeper truth. The invisible realm is the reality. The visible realm is simply a creation of what we have decided we're going to call it. What if you could decide something else? What if you could decide that love is who you are, love is what you are, and it's an opportunity now to live that in the world. Thank you so much for allowing me to be here with you.
Nice.